This is ice. This is some material from one of Earth's major continents. And this is Antarctica, the most unknown landmass of all time. Unknown? Wait. Haven't humans discovered everything already by sailing all over the planet and planting flags in other people's countries? It turns out, no, especially with Antarctica, a continent where history is obscure and where flag planting is illegal. We don't know a lot about Antarctica, and that has something to do with the fact that it's an ice-covered death land that is indifferent to your needs. But how did Antarctica become such a dispassionate deep freeze? Well, let's start from the beginning. Sometime before your mom was born, Antarctica was part of Gondwana, a supercontinent whose superpower involved having been formed before Pangaea, which makes Gondwana a kind of hipster of supercontinents. During the Paleozoic era 500 million years ago, Gondwana straddled the equator like someone who couldn't pick sides. Parts of what would become West Antarctica spent time in the northern hemisphere, and parts of East Antarctica spent time in the tropics. That's right, in its youth, Antarctica was hot. Bet you didn't see that coming. This was also the time for the
Cambrian explosion.
That means the old gang, trilobites, Cnidaria, Halkiriorid, and Archaeocyathra were all hanging around in the oceans now, just like old times. Not much lived on land, although that was changing. As the Paleozoic continued on, Gondwana began making its way south by way of
plate tectonics.
However, it wasn't all ice cream and popsicles yet. The supercontinent had taken on substantial flora and fauna, including now extinct versions of seed ferns which grew in swamps. That's right, Antarctic swamps. By the end of the Devonian period, Gondwana was at the South Pole, but it wasn't quite a deep freeze yet. That would come later. In the Mesozoic era, the Earth had been getting hot and bothered for some time, and Gondwana slowly became desert-like. Seed ferns held on in East Antarctica, and later ginkgo trees and cycads became popular. In West Antarctica, there were large conifer forests and southern beech trees. There were animals, too. A charming little reptile known as Lystrosaurus lived there. And there were also true Antarctic dinosaurs, namely Antarctopelta and Cryolophosaurus. Global climate and the arrangement of the Gondwana landmass around the South Pole conspired to keep Gondwana much warmer than it is today, and thus much more habitable. However, due to axial tilt, Gondwana's faunas had to contend with
the dreaded polar night.
That is, the absence of sunlight for weeks or months at a time. Which means that the dinosaurs there had to have adapted their vision and lifestyle. Can you imagine? Dinosaurs stalking prey in an ancient polar forest?
Using night vision?
By the end of the reign of the dinosaurs, it was time for Antarctica to break up and get modern. 55 million years ago, Australia decided to see other continents and left, followed later by Tasmania, as always. This changed the ocean current pattern, pushing Antarctica to be noticeably colder and sad. Around 30 million years ago, South America packed up and left, opening the Drake Passage and allowing the Antarctic Circumpolar Current to come into existence, which made Antarctica even colder and even more sad. Meanwhile, dinosaurs turned into birds, mammals got crazy and went everywhere, the global climate cooled considerably, and a particular lineage of primate, the humans, wisened up and turned fire into civilization. A particular subset of these humans, who affectionately refer to their home as a continent, began to explore the world's oceans by ship. The humans crossed the Antarctic Circle for the first time in 1773 and actually laid eyes on the continent by 1820. In 1821, some of the humans even put their feet on it, supposedly. And they found that Antarctica wasn't alone anymore. Some of the dinosaurs that had turned into birds later turned into penguins, and penguins are the best friend that any continent could ever have, ever. There were also elephant seals too, which are friends of no one. Then the humans got competitive. Some humans tried to stay in Antarctica for months and years, and they built permanent bases and went around as far as they could. Some teams of humans tried to race against each other to reach the South Pole. One team succeeded and became famous. A month later, a second team succeeded and then died, but became famous as well. Then nations began to get competitive over what was in Antarctica, even though the dinosaurs there weren't quite the same anymore. Britain tried to claim all of Antarctica by claiming a bunch of islands nearby, islands that belonged to someone else. France thought this was unfair and said, "What about our claim?" And Britain said, "Okay, that's fair." Then Norway said, "Hey, what about our claim?" And then Britain said, Okay, that's fair. Then the Nazis tried to claim a section of Antarctica and even airdropped a bunch of metal arrows with swastikas all over them to make their point. Then they lost World War II and no one listened to them anymore. Meanwhile, Argentina and Chile were very upset about what Britain did, so they went into Antarctica and planted their own flags, which ruffled Britain's feathers. Britain moved Argentina's flags and planted their own, and Chile planted its own flags in places Britain liked. Meanwhile, the United States had been moving in to establish itself the whole time, with airplanes and ships and men. Then, all of the competing nations said, wait, what do we have in common? Our dislike of the Soviet Union? Right. So they got together to prevent the Soviets from planting flags, which didn't work because the Soviets very much wanted to plant flags. Then the world had a global science project called the International Geophysical Year, which led to 18 months of crazy Antarctic research. Everyone got involved and helped each other. Nations built research stations, and scientists learned new things. Everyone liked this new science thing so much that they decided to sign a treaty, the Antarctic Treaty of 1959, which turned Antarctica into a science-only continent. Militaries were banned. Flag planting was banned. Antarctica was to be a place where everyone worked together and where penguins could be your friend. Even the Soviet Union, who no one liked, was invited. And that's the story of Antarctica. For now.